Hey everyone, welcome to CMN Less Than 10. This is a resource produced by the Church Multiplication Network. It's guaranteed to be less than 10 minutes.
All right,
We're going to be held accountable by a little timer on the screen. I'm here with my friend George Westlake. He is a pastor, he's a district leader, and just an awesome Kansas City Chiefs fan, if you haven't noticed already, repping the gear. His son is a great friend of mine, and now he is becoming a great friend of mine as well. And we're actually going to be talking about fathers and sons in ministry. Why don't you share a little bit about your story, how the call of God came on your life through your father's ministry, and what that looks like now, and what you continue to leave with your own son.
Okay, thanks, Mike. My dad was a pastor, and very flamboyant. Kind of drug, sex, and rock and roll.
Right.
Pastor, everything's wrong, everything's sin.
Right.
We're all going to hell.
In your face.
Oh man, yeah. I got saved multitudes of times, and would pray every night before I went to bed. That Jesus not return, because it could happen anytime,
right,
at any moment. And so, I followed him and raised in a pastor's home. I was starting to kind of feel a call to ministry, but I was afraid of it.
Right.
Because my dad's very outward, very loud, very aggressive. He's a very active preacher. I never saw myself doing that. I was afraid to even think about doing that. I thought, I can't do that. I don't want to do that.
Right.
So I tried to run from the call, and I was successful for a period of time. I graduated from high school, and I was doing anything but going to ministry.
Right.
It was like a lot of preachers' kids.
Yep.
People would say, "You're going to be a pastor just like your dad," and I'd say, "No, I'm not."
Right.
And so I would try to commit prolific sins, and kind of make my mark that way, and that was pretty widely known.
Right.
And then when I graduated from high school, I was a drummer. Went and traveled with a band.
Right.
And we had the bus and the thing, and they were a group out of Florida. It's like, this is my life. I'm gone. Thank you. I'm out.
Yeah.
And I traveled with them for just a number of months, and God in that amount of time made me so miserable.
Wow.
That I was sitting in somebody's house, Mississippi, Alabama,
Right, somewhere on
a southern state.
Right.
I was sitting in somebody's house on the floor of their kitchen at probably 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And that was back when we had phones with long cords.
Yeah.
And so I took the phone off and made myself at home and made a long distance call to my dad. I called him at 3 o'clock in the morning from Mississippi and said, "Hey, I'm here in Mississippi, and I need to go into the ministry." And he said,
Wow.
"I knew you'd be calling."
Wow.
He said, "I knew you'd be calling." So in about a week, I was home. School was starting immediately, so I got enrolled in Bible college, which I didn't want to go to.
Right.
Had no business going to. I'm not sure I was even a Christian at that point, and definitely not going to be a preacher.
Right.
And so I did that, went through college. I was still going to be a drummer. I played, I traveled. That was my life. Okay, I'll do ministry, but I'll do it my way.
Wow.
And so God just kept pushing me a little bit further. And everything I've said I wasn't going to do in ministry, I've ended up doing. I'll never be a youth pastor.
Isn't that the case?
I was a youth pastor.
Yeah.
I'll never work with adults. Adults are obnoxious. I'll never
Right.
work with adults. I was with adults. I'll never pastor a church. I will never, ever do that.
Now you are.
And now I am. So
Yeah.
God is a cruel and malicious God.
What was it about your father's love for you that made you call him the first person that you called, that made you go back to him? What was it about? How did he raise you to that point to where, even though he might think that you were rebelling by being in the band, that he would still pick up the phone and love you through all that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and very, very viable. He was consistent. He was the same guy all the time.
Wow.
What he preached against, he lived against.
Wow.
What he preached for, he lived for.
Wow.
And he supported me as dad. He was, back then we got whipped for everything.
Right.
So,
right.
Every day of my life, I would just go to my room and wait.
Right. You knew it was coming.
Oh, absolutely. And so, we got spanked for everything. We got whipped for everything. And if you didn't get whipped, you got grounded. So he was strong that way, but he was consistent and he loved me. I played several sports in high school, and a lot of times he would be the only parent there.
Wow.
He would come to baseball games, which you're playing baseball in 30-degree weather when the season starts, and we'd be out, playing some consolidated school 100 miles away.
Right. Still be
and
there.
he would show up. He'd be the only guy from our school there.
Wow.
And he did that consistently, supported me in everything I did, whether he agreed with it or disagreed with it. And he was a great dad.
Wow. And that translates over to your son now, who's also in full-time ministry.
Yes.
And I'm sure that the same things that your dad exemplified, you have exemplified for your son.
It's kind of funny because there were a lot of basketball games over the years.
Right.
I was the only parent or one of 2 or 3 parents
Wow.
there.
Wow.
And I thought, yeah, this is what's important. It's what matters.
How do you think, if maybe a father is watching this right now, raising a son, what are some of the things that they could do practically to really show that consistency and show that love? And I'm sure every pastor, their desires for their kid to go into the ministry at some degree, but what do they do when they don't go into the ministry immediately?
Yeah, and my oldest son is not in the ministry. He's an IT guy and brilliant. He's the smartest one of all of us.
Right.
But maybe that's why he's not in the
Yeah.
ministry. No, he. I think a lot of attention, real interest. I never tried to make my sons like me, my children like me. They're allowed to have their own thoughts,
Right.
and obviously have to form their own relationship with God and have their own understanding of who God is and how He functions. But the thread leads to, a lot of times we interpret God as we see our fathers.
Right.
So there's a correlation there. Obviously, I would say dads, touch your kids. Touch them.
Yeah.
I'm not a real touchy-feely guy. Like if we get in a group and somebody says, let's gather around in a circle and hold hands, and I want to get out the door.
Right.
That's not me. I don't like people giving me back rubs and shoulder rubs when they're talking to me, but I touch my kids.
Right,
touch
right,
your kids.
right.
Put your hands on them. Let them
There's
know
an
you know
element
them.
of blessing in
Absolutely.
that, right? Like even it's scriptural
Absolutely.
to lay your hands on your kids in a prayerful, blessing way.
Absolutely. I would walk around at night while they were sleeping, pray outside their doors, pray by
Yeah.
their beds, pray over them every day. I was that dad. I took my kids to school
Yeah.
every single day until they got to a point where they said, I don't want you to take me anymore, or they were driving themselves.
Right. Right.
I took my kids to school every day. That was something I did, and every day I would pray the same prayer over them
great.
before they got out of the car.
Wow. Wow. Now your son is in ministry and you're watching him, do ministry, which
He's
is
amazing.
awesome.
He's amazing.
Yeah. I wonder too, he's probably has the thread of that whole thing from your father.
Right.
Now all the way through the generations. Do you see some of the attributes in him and how he's raising his young son now?
I do. I watch him as a father, and I see a father that loves his son, is involved with his son, gives his son time,
Right.
and allows his son to be a priority when sometimes it's not convenient.
Right. Right.
And I see
Ministry will eat up your
that.
schedule.
Oh, terribly.
There's always someone to meet with. There's
Right.
always a meeting to go to.
Well, and my kids watched me, many times walk out the door at night to go deal with something. And, they knew I didn't really want to do it, but this is what I have to do. This is what I'm called to do. And somehow that impacted them.
Wow.
Because they talk about that, and the fact that they saw me going out to do ministry, even though they knew I was more comfortable at home, spoke to them.
Well, George, I really appreciate your time. I think this really is ministering to people who might be struggling raising their kids or really want to see their kids thrive in ministry. And so thank you for your time.
And you're welcome. Thanks, Mike.
God bless you guys. Thanks for watching this week's CMN Less Than 10. We'll see you next time.